Hey everybody, SPAZ here, and it's time for another episode of But Is It Power Pop? On this episode, I have a stack of things I want to go through here, but I want to start out, remember, I'm not here to define a genre. I'm here to merely introduce you to things that you may not have heard that are power pop or power pop adjacent, things that power pop lovers will most likely enjoy. And we're going to start off this episode with the Cowsills. Now, everybody remembers them from the 60s with things like The Rain in the Park and other things. Love American Style, Hair, Indian Lake. This is the same band. It's actually partial band. There's only 4 of the original Cowsills on this album, but it's fantastic pop hooks. It's just a wonderful album. Harmonies. Now it doesn't sound like the Cowsills of the 60s or early 70s. This was the Cowsills of the early 90s. This was actually released in I think 98, but it was recorded at least 5 years before that. But it's just jam-packed full of great songs. In fact, some of my favorite Cowsills songs are on this album, including Is It Any Wonder and Some Good Years. But this is an absolute fabulous album that they put out themselves. This may be a little difficult to get a hold of, but it's very worth your while. The Cowsills Global. Next up, everybody remembers sort of the mod and power pop scenes of the late 70s and early 80s. Well, here's a band called The Blades. I'll show you 2 CDs. This is a collection of earlier tracks from 80 to 85, and this is their album Last Man in Europe. Singer-songwriter Paul Cleary led the band. Both of these CDs, by the way, they have a few bonus tracks there. But Paul Cleary led the band, great songwriter, great songs. They didn't get much attention outside of Ireland, I think. In fact, there's a song on here called Ghost of a Chance that I always put on compilation tapes back in about 85, 86 or so, because that's the first time I heard it. I picked up the LP at Middle Earth in Downey, but I was able to get a hold of the CD. Both of these are fantastic, filled with mod power popish gems, and very, 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 very worth your while. I don't know if there's much on the interwebs in terms of YouTube or whatever, but definitely The Blades is a band to get. And there's 2 CDs. Does anybody remember a band called Cherry Twister? Fantastic, wonderful, sweet power pop. When I say sweet, I don't mean bubblegummy like the Archies or whatever, but the leader, Steve Ward, could really just write some of the most amazingly beautiful power pop songs, whether they were tough or whether they were light and mellow, but he just had a way with writing great, wonderful hooks. Now, I don't have the entire Cherry Twister catalog. I'm trying to track it all down on CD, and I don't have any solo Steve Ward, and I got to track those down. But I do have Fauna Flora. This is the band that Steve Ward formed, and he's basically the main member. And I will tell you, the songs are just as lovely. And, when I say lovely, okay, it doesn't sound like the Rubinoos, but you know how Tommy Dunbar can write these songs that are they just melt your heart? That's what Steve Ward could do. He's so underrated. But Fauna Flora isn't quite power pop. There's more keyboards and on the album. It's not synth pop. It's just more for atmosphere. But it is just an absolutely beautiful album. I want to own everything that this guy's ever written, because so far everything I've heard by him, it's just heartwarming and heart-melting at the same time. And here is an artist here by the name of Steve Forbert. Now, no, of course not. Steve Forbert is not power pop. But this album here, it came out at the right time. It's got that same edgy production. But what I wanted really to point out is the fact that this is filled with great songs, and it's actually been remixed. If you notice, this is a little Stevie Orbit, but it's the 2018 remixed version. They actually went in and spread things out a little bit, add a little bit of warmth to it, and it sounds actually much better. I didn't think the original album sounded bad, but I wanted to bring that to your attention because I know that a lot of power poppers do like other stuff, and this Steve Forbert thing is really worth your while. Definitely, hit up Steve Forbert's website, and then he has a band store. This actually might be available in stores now too, but at least for the first few months it was only on his website. Here's a band called Tonight. Everyone knows their song Drummer Man, but this is a collection of tracks. If you like Drummer Man, this is on the Angel Air label. If you like Drummer Man, you're going to love the rest of the CD, because it's full of that same punk poppy energy. A lot of people call that song power pop. A lot of people call it punk. Doesn't matter because it's great. Yeah, it could be considered power pop, but I guess I sort of put them along the lines of like the Boys and the Incredible Kidda Band, bands that sort of walk that line between, really 60s influenced punk and power pop. So Tonight is the name of the band. Drummer Man is the name of the CD. That's out on Angel Air. In the 90s, Warner Brothers signed some really interesting bands. Of course, the one that we all love is Greenberry Woods. But another band that I thought was very interesting and very unique was a band called the Judy Bats. Now, the Judy Bats had, their sound was, combined, American rock or American alternative with little hints of XTC and, very creative band. And I couldn't believe that Warner Brothers not only released their debut album, but they released their next 3 albums as well. So there's 4 Judy Bats albums. All of them have great songs on it. Probably my favorite is, album-wise, is Down in the Shacks Where the Satellite Dishes Grow as an album. But then one of my favorite songs is like Don't Drop the Baby off of Native Son. And definitely the Judy Bats. There's Pain is Beautiful and... I already showed that one. There you go. See, but the Judy Bats were a great band. Not power pop, but definitely if you like, let's say you like the more melodic side of the Replacements, or you like maybe the more esoteric side of Greenberry Woods, or, it's very much in that early 90s alternative rock vein. I guess you could say a little bit of REM. But they were definitely a band. They had their own unique sound. And like I said, that XTC influence, whether it's intentional or not, is very prominent in their music. Here is a band called the V.I.P.s. They were a somewhere between a punk, mod, and power pop band, sort of a mixture of all three. This is an album that came out on the Tangerine Records label, who also put out the Jet Set, Squire, Direct Hits, things like that. And this compiles a lot of their singles, and I don't think the band ever put out an album, so this might pretty much be what they actually released. But there are a lot of great songs that ended up on this compilation because they're a great band. Just one of those bands that you sit there and go, how come more people don't know about them? Or how come, there's going to be a lot of people going, how come I didn't know about them before? Well, you know about them now because their songs have ended up on various compilations. But this is a nice set if you want to investigate the band further. And then, let me see here, another band that I love, and I've loved to death since the first time I heard them. It's a band called Any Trouble. And this is the cover of their first album, but it's slightly rejigged. In fact, this CD here is a 3-CD set, and you'll see it has the first album, Where All the Nice Girls, Wheels in Motion, and then the live album, Live at the Venue. And this is... If you liked Elvis Costello and Joe Jackson, it's kind of like Elvis Costello, or a mixture between Elvis Costello and Marshall Crenshaw. It's got the jangle of Marshall Crenshaw mixed with the intelligent, urgent sound of Elvis Costello and the Attractions. It compiles first 2 albums and the live album, plus bonus tracks. So you have pretty much everything they recorded for Stiff Records right there. But that's not all. Now, their third album is not available on CD. That's just self-titled. It was the one that was more kind of synthy, had a lot of keyboards. I love that album. I just hoped one day it comes out officially on CD. But Wrong End of the Race was their 4th album. Half the band is new. There's instead of a second guitar player, they have a keyboard player, but it's more piano on this album. Piano and organ. And the drummer was new compared to the original lineup. But this here is produced by Will Birch from the Records. This is absolutely just a killer album. It actually, in the UK, I believe, it was a double album. In the US, it was a single, so they whittled it down a little bit. But this has everything you need, and this runs the gamut. I mean, if you just want straight-ahead power pop, it's there. If you want soulful Motown-influenced songs, it's there. If you want sort of folkish ballads, it's there. It's just an absolutely incredible album. Wrong End of the Race, Any Trouble. There was also, after that album they broke up, there was also Live in Reverse, which was their first reunion album, and it came out on Stiff Records. They had 3 of the original members on it. And then they also put out one called Present Tense a few years back. Great thing about this is on one of Glenn Campbell's last albums, he had a song called Any Trouble. So, of course, Any Trouble wrote a song called Glenn Campbell, and that's on this album. So that's one to check out. And I think that I may have spoken about this before, but it never hurts to talk about great music again because, I don't think that there's anybody who's ever sat there and watched every episode of But Is It Power Pop? So for most of you, this is probably going to be something new. But remember when Tears for Fears put out the song Sowing the Seeds of Love? It was very Beatlesque and it was just bombastic and ambitious and lush and wonderful. And, well, the album that came out called The Seeds of Love was nothing like that. That single was the only song like that on the album. Well, when they reunited for the Everybody Loves a Happy Ending, this is the album that Sowing the Seeds of Love should have been on. This is pretty much, it may not be as bombastic production-wise, but boy, does it reach for the stars. And it just comes up. This one has bonus tracks, by the way. This is a UK version, I think. But it is just big and beautiful and lush and great songs, very creative, great hooks. This is not the sound of Shout and Everybody Wants to Rule the World. This is more the sound of Sowing the Seeds of Love. And that's Tears for Fears, Everybody Loves a Happy Ending. I think that came out like about 15 years ago. And this was a great... Do I want to say return to form? Well, every Tears for Fears album was different. I don't know if anyone's ever paid attention to that. But every good artist... Every album they put out is different, and that's why sometimes they lose fans along the way. It's, well, gosh, they don't sound like Shout. This doesn't sound like the same band that did Mad World or Pale Shelter, but I love a band when they evolve and change. But anyway, that's it for this episode of But Is It Power Pop? I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you discovered something, and remember to... always tune in to my other shows. I got CD Junkie. I've got Comically Speaking. You can find those on YouTube. Also, I have 2 radio shows. One is called Return of the Living 80s, which is all 80s music. I have one called Skip Dobbin with SPAZ, which is more power pop mixed with easy listening and classic power pop and modern. And then I have a podcast called Beach Blanket Fort Bingo. So until the next time we meet, smell you later.